Solomon Prelate Matebula, well known as Kalanga Sol Prelate on social media. I just want to share a bit of my experience in the grassroots level, that's rural areas that I have traveled when doing my journalistic work, particularly on gender-based violence. Because many people would like to know what is gender-based violence, what happened when we talk about gender-based violence. As an independent journalist, I have realized that gender-based violence is a very critical issue, not only in South Africa, but throughout the world. One thing that I have found when covering gender-based violence kind of stories, especially in Limpopo, in some part of Mpumalanga, there is still a need of awareness when it comes to gender-based violence. Even though government is trying by its own power to ensure that gender-based violence is addressed, especially to the young upcoming generation. But we cannot shy away from it. Gender-based violence remains a second pandemic that South Africa and other countries are facing. Last year only, 2020, about 1.7% increased. It was 7.7% of rape cases that was increased to over, that made over about 53,000 cases only. So you would understand that here we are dealing with a serious case in here. We're not only dealing with the pandemic that we are currently facing as the world, but we also have another pandemic that that are with us. And yet, this is a serious case. As I've been to the ground, as I've been to the grassroots level, where journalism as a career, journalism as a passion for me, was really, shown that indeed this is a very, important career that I have chosen in my life. I've came to realize that most of people in the grassroots level, they still need awareness. I've came across, many young girls who have been abused. I've came across many, women who have been abused. There are type of abuses that they've experienced. Could it be that some of them experience online abuse, social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and a man will just come up with a name that that the name that is not theirs, just to recruit them, and of course at the end of the day they end up finding themselves in danger. And also the other thing that the other case that I once found in Mpumalanga was a case whereby poverty led these young girls into finding themselves in this particular situation, and it was very bad. I could feel when the person was sharing that indeed this is a serious pandemic that South Africa and in other countries are still struggling to address. So the question is, what do we do as citizens? What do we do as journalists to ensure that this particular crisis is well addressed, and there is an awareness that can reach as far as to the grassroots level, like the place that I went through, the place that I've gone there, the place that I have visited and still want to visit another place, throughout the country, to ensure that this particular case is addressed adequately. That is the question for everyone. What do you do as a citizen? What do you do as a citizen of this country to make sure that women are not abused? children are not abused. You remember that in this very month, the world itself was, celebrating, of course, International Women's Day. What comes to your mind? What comes to your mind when you get, the concept Women's Day? You've got to understand that this is where our minds have to come back and say, we need to make sure that we encourage, other people who are not aware that whatever that they are doing to these women is abuse. Someone would say, how do we abuse them? Abuse are in many forms. There are abuses that you can commit without knowing. For example, if you practice, financial abuse. And what do I mean by the word financial abuse? You find that your woman is working and you are not working, and you keep on demanding money, and by demanding money you have to manipulate that person, saying that if you don't give me this money, then I will do this and I will do that. That's another type of an abuse, and there are many abuse that I can mention in here. But to cut it short, what I'm trying to put it in here to the world is that this thing of gender-based violence is a serious case, and it needs to be addressed swiftly. Yes, I know that there are many organizations that are on board with government to ensure that this particular case is being addressed, but it does not end there. It does not end there, because it needs us as citizens to come to board to say, let us help each other. Let us ensure that we educate our young people, our young men, to ensure that this young man does not continue, abusing these girls, abusing, these mothers, and so forth. So the other case that I experienced when covering these stories, I think this one, if I recall very well, it was in the Mopani district, whereby a woman was abused by a husband, and the reason behind was because the wife could not contain the pain, because she did not have the means to survive. And the husband kept on doing what? Kept on abusing physical. That was a physical abuse. He kept on abusing the woman, beating the woman each and every day. And of course, until it was reported to us to say, here is the matter, and this is what is happening in the community, then I had to rush there and write the story and make sure that I refer that person to the specific, organizations that can help, deal with that particular matter. But what I'm trying to ensure is that sometimes poverty can lead, this woman into, getting themselves, in a corner where they are getting abused, because, I'm getting abused. Look, like I'm tolerating this abuse because, I don't have work. I'm tolerating this abuse because I have children. I have to make sure that, they find, a means to survive. I don't have work. Part of the reasons why many people and many young women, are abused is because of poverty. Yes, I've experienced that, and the part of the stories that was shared to me was the fact that unemployment rate led to or contributed to this particular act of gender-based violence.
Audio Jungle.
So the other person said to me, do you think it's only women who are being abused? Based on the experience on this particular coverage, gender-based violence, I did not only find women, but also men. Yes, I can say that with confidence that even men are abused out there, but predominantly, as statistics says, women are abused. In South Africa, it's about 51% of every woman in South Africa, have experienced abuse. So this tells us that most women in South Africa are abused, and the fact that, and we all know that if a woman is abused, in other words, there is a man involved. So that's how it works. And how do we prevent it? Do we have awareness in South Africa? Do we visit this grassroots level? How do we practice our journalism? Because our journalism have to be practiced in the grassroots level. And when you go to the grassroots level, that's where you find our community media, that's where you find newspapers, you find community radio stations. And that's where you have to find also professional journalists who can go through to these communities, trying to address this particular gender-based violence crisis. So if we do not have such quality of journalism, that can send journalists themselves, to go to these, villages and make sure that, people are aware of the crisis itself. It means we still have a long way to go in South Africa. We still have a long way to go. You remember that when South Africa declared lockdown in 2020 last year, like the cases of gender-based violence grew rapidly, and most of people, we started believing that I think lockdown perpetuated gender-based violence, because this tells us that most of men do not just stay at home. They don't sleep at home. They don't spend their time with their women. The moment they spend their time with their women is the moment they abuse them. Lockdown was forcing them to stay together. It was forcing everyone to stay indoors. And that's where we get to understand, we get to realize that gender-based violence grew rapidly when it comes to that. So my advice as an independent journalist who's been to the field, who've been to the grassroots level, where journalism, where the quality of journalism is less valued. I must repeat this. In the grassroots level, that's where journalism that's where journalism is less valued. Because many people are not aware that we've got journalists who can at least help us. We've got journalists who can take our problems, who can take our stories, who can voice all our grievances and concerns to the public, to the government, to the stakeholders, so that help, can be provided thereof. But I understand, as I've been to the ground, that South Africa and other stakeholders and government itself need to come to the realization that this is a second pandemic and it needs to be addressed swiftly. It needs to be taken into consideration, because if you check mostly things are very tough out there. So I'm advising all journalists, I'm advising all community media, I'm advising all community radio stations to please visit these people in the grassroots level, interact with them, hear their stories, get what people have to say about gender-based violence, and make sure that it reaches the right organizations for counseling, it reaches the right department for counseling, so that life can continue as usual.